I am the greatest. I wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick your ass. Won't do shit. Just stick and move. Waking you up and saying, now stick and move. Keep your hands up.
Welcome, guys, to the final episode of the Stick and Move podcast. I'm your host, Trey, and yes, I said final. I know on the thumbnail it says finale, and it is true. Things are changing for me and this podcast, and I had to make some tough decisions, and I'll explain towards the end of this episode what is going on, because honestly, I love this podcast. It's meant everything to me. We've literally been on one full complete year, and it pains me to end this episode. If I'm not mistaken, I think today is the 1 year anniversary, coincidentally, and that was not the plan. I wanted to get to 100 full episodes, but things have changed, and I'll explain that towards the end. But the reason why I'm actually having a full complete episode is, like I said, I love this channel. I love talking to our subscribers, to our first-time listeners in the comments section, seeing what you guys have to say, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, or you guys giving me your top three or telling me where my top three went wrong. I wanted to have one last episode, and the top threes that I've enjoyed the most is doing the top 90s boxers, top 80s boxers. So I thought, why not have the top 70s boxers as my finale? So let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, at the end of the episode, I'll explain why it's time for me to move on, perhaps. But so let's go ahead and get started. So, and I'll be honest with you guys, and I know I said this when I did the 90s episode and the 80s episode. The 90s episode I did with my old co-host, Sam, but the 80s episode that I did a few weeks ago, that was challenging. I'm not going to lie. When I did this 70s one, now this is before my lifetime, and to be honest with you, I was still very familiar with a lot of these boxers. Like I've told y'all throughout the history of this podcast, I grew up, my father and my uncle and relatives always talking about boxers from the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, pre-World War II, everything to that point. And when I was breaking down, doing my research, not only on my favorite boxers, but I was trying to go dig a little bit deeper. A lot of boxers I have not mentioned on this podcast, embarrassingly. And I was like, damn, the 70s was such a prolific, underrated decade of boxing. People tend to associate the 70s with the heavyweights, but I got to be honest with you. Those middleweights, those lightweights, those featherweights, those bantamweights had a lot to say and a lot to contribute. And that's why I'm going to go with my number three. My number three, guys, is from Argentina, Carlos Monzon. Now, look, nickname Escopeta, which means shotgun. And if you guys ever watch his style, he brought something different to that middleweight division, in my opinion. See, to me, when I watch those old fights, the lighter weight divisions, outside of the heavyweight divisions, guys, they were mostly headhunters, a non-relentless throwing. The fight would conclude with over 800 to over 1,000 punches, mostly all to the head hunting. Monzon brought something different. I loved his style because he was a side-to-side boxer. And most boxers that use side-to-side, in my opinion, were more defensive. And don't get me wrong, Monzon was very good as a defensive fighter, which is why he's number three on my list. But he used the side-to-side for his offense as well. And it was relentless, and for a middleweight, very, very, very underrated in terms of being a prolific as an all-time great jab. And when I watch his old videos, especially against the likes of Emil Griffin, or a Benny Briscoe, or Tom Boggs. You see how he uses the ring, as he just had a different level of intelligence, and he would use that ring to his advantage, and he would create this phenomenal record of 87 wins, 3 losses. And here's the interesting thing: 9 draws. Now, the theory I have why he had so many draws, guys, was because back then you weren't rewarded as much if you use defense, I guess, as your offense. We tend to glorify the great fighters that tend to do that, like Floyd Mayweather, um, Winky Wright, Shakur Stevenson, you want to go to today, who use their defense as offense. And it tends to be more of a boring fight. Although Monzon was not a boring fighter, I think a lot of these judges were looking at his side to side movement, the way he would use the ring, as him kind of um, not being relentless, as his opponent was always going forward and trying to land on him. I think that's the root of his draws right there. Go ahead, all you guys that are historians on my channel, go ahead, leave comments. What is your thought about why he had so many draws? But let me go to his losses and his draws. What I love about his losses is that he avenged all of them. If you look at his draws, out of his 9 draws, guys, if I'm not mistaken, I think he avenged 5 or 6 of the 9, if I'm not mistaken. But look, if you want to talk about who he is, and by the way, guys, I'm still in Manila, as you guys can tell. There's a lot of noise in the background. I apologize. But look, let's just go to his accolades. Okay. He was undisputed world middleweight champion for 7 years, successfully defended his title 14 times against 11 different fighters, and is widely regarded as not only one of the best middleweights in history, but also one of the greatest boxers ever, guys. If I'm not mistaken, Boxing Rec has named him the top 4. I think it was number 4, the greatest pound for pound boxers of all time. Even the Ring magazine would have him the 11th greatest fighter of the 20th century. So that goes to show you that a very underrated, great all-time fighter. Not to mention, guys, he holds the second longest unified championship reign in middleweight history at 9 consecutive defenses. So for Carlos Monzon, there's so much unsaid about him in the lore of the boxing greats. Now, there is a reason for that. For those of y'all that are not familiar, he does have a dark history. He would actually serve an 11-year prison sentence. Actually, he would not serve the complete 11-year prison sentence, because in between his sentencing, he was given a brief furlough for family, something going down with his family. And on his way back to prison, he would get into a car accident where his car would roll off a hill and he would pass away along with the others. But the reason why he was in prison to begin with, guys, is he had an addiction to alcohol, as most boxers and a lot of people do in general. He was very physical with all his partners, and one got a little too aggressive, and he ended up throwing his wife off a balcony and killing her instantly. And there's so much more history on that part as well. I don't want to go deep into this because this is more on the boxing side. And I thought to myself, should I have a dark figure like this? Should I even give him the shine necessary? And that's something I've been thinking about. And to be honest with you guys, I just felt like, you know what? This is a boxing podcast. I would be lying to myself and you guys if I did not include him in, because of what I think is just wrong. And he is my number 3, guys. As a boxer, he was, to me, very underrated, underappreciated. I think that has a lot to do with this dark past. We're trying to move on him, away from him, or the media is trying to move away from him. But as far as accomplishments and his greatness in the 70s, I have to go with Carlos Monzon. Tell me, guys. Tell me in the comments, guys, if you think that's a legit number 3. Should I have kept him off because of his dark past? I want to know. Let's go ahead and get down to my number 2. Now, my number 2, guys, is as controversial as it gets because I've been criticized heavily for my constant talk about him. And if that doesn't give it away, I'll say this. This will. It's Muhammad Ali. I know the comments are going to say, how can you not have Muhammad Ali, your number 1 boxer of all time? And look, guys, I was raised on Muhammad Ali. My relatives, my father, they were the biggest Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay fans of all time. Even when Muhammad Ali was the most hated man on earth, my uncle, my father were standing by his side, figuratively, of course. They loved him even during the protest. And I grew up my entire life just hearing the greatness and the stories of all time about how great Muhammad Ali was. And he was, no doubt about it. But I can't go that far. My number 2 is Muhammad Ali. And do I feel bad about that? Absolutely. But I'll be honest with you guys. If this was a list, and perhaps if this podcast does ever come back, we'll do the most influential boxers of all time, he would definitely be number 1. He is probably the number 1 influential sportsman of all time. You can argue that he's one of the most influential people of the 20th century ever, not just boxers. But I had to put him number 2. Now, it's so interesting because when you look at his record throughout the 70s, he actually gets off his suspension in 1970 itself. Comes back, fights Jerry Query, Oscar Bonavena as kind of like tune-up fights, even though Query and Bonavena were respectable fighters, more so Query than anything. And he goes after the big guy, Smoking Joe Frazier, for the world heavyweight title that Joe Frazier now obtained. And y'all know the history on that fight, guys. It is taught in history books as I talk to my students about that fight in the fight of the century. Both undefeated. Frazier at the time 26-0. Muhammad Ali at the time 31-0. And look, they went the distance. That leaping left a huge legacy on this fight, asking people for asking for the second fight, and of course the Thriller in Manila, which is an all-time great. I labeled it the greatest fight I've ever seen in my whole life because it is, in my opinion, Thriller in Manila. But Muhammad Ali, I have him number 2. And the case I can see why he should be number 1 is because he fought everybody and he beat the big dogs. He beat Joe Frazier. I think I've mentioned this before on that second fight that he beat him decisively, pretty much a lopsided, maybe giving 3 to 4 rounds to Frazier. Y'all know the history with the Rumble in the Jungle with George Foreman winning that fight in the 8th round, turning it around, rope-a-dope, everything like that. He fought everybody, guys. He fought Jimmy Ellis. He fought Buster Mathis. He fought, like I said, George Chavallo. He fought Floyd Patterson twice. He fought Ken Norton 3 times. And I get it. A lot of people say Ken Norton won all 3 of those fights. But the history books is the history books. This guy did not back down from anybody. Even fought a Ron Lyle that nobody wanted to fight. At the time, he was just a long bruiser of a fighter. I mean, he fought everyone to the point where he left nothing behind. He fought a Spinks that he would lose to, that he would avenge later on. He would fight Ernie Shavers with a unanimous decision in that 15th round. Ernie Shavers is already known as probably having the most heavy-handed thumping power in probably boxing history, very underrated. But he fought everyone. And I have to give it to Muhammad Ali as my number 2, 56-5 record. And it's a shame that a lot of these new guys that are getting into the boxing world today, they are discrediting Muhammad Ali. And that just bothers me. It just goes to show me that they're not willing to look into the actual history that Muhammad Ali went through. And I don't know. He is the pillar of boxing. And I'm kind of embarrassed to have him number two, but I just can't argue with my number one, guys. Go ahead, tell me what you think about having Muhammad Ali at number two. Am I crazy? Give me your top three. Give me your number two as well, obviously. But my number one is Wilfredo Bazooka Gomez. Look, from Puerto Rico, he is the ambassador of the Mexican versus Puerto Rico rivalry in boxing. He is there, no doubt about it. The reason why I have him number one, guys, is that the records are just so impressive. He actually starts his career off in a draw, 0-1, very rare, and then goes on a 32 win streak with 32 straight knockouts or stoppages, which was unheard of at the time. Actually, it was done before, but for that division where, like I mentioned before, especially on the super bantamweights, featherweights, those divisions there, where it's just straight up like fighting in a phone booth from the first to last rounds. The idea that he goes that long, going 32-0, until losing in 1980 itself to Salvador Sanchez. I'm sorry, 1981 against Salvador Sanchez. He would hold major titles, guys. He would have the WC junior featherweight title from 77 to 83. I know this is a 70s podcast, but I should go to show you. He would have the ring junior featherweight. I know the ring is not really belt is not really considered a sanctioned belt, but from 79 to 83, he was the WBC featherweight champion and WBA junior lightweight. And throughout the 80s, guys, his greatest victories being against Rocky Lockridge, which he was. Look, here's one thing that impresses me about his record. He had 44 victories with 3 losses and a draw. His first draw ever. His first fight ever was that draw, like I said. 42 of the 44 wins were by knockout or by TKO. That is, and one of them was against Lockridge. So that goes to show you the dominance that Wilfredo Gomez had. Look, he was successful in 17 defenses of his 122-pound title. He had 17 knockouts, a 23 record in world title fights, 18 knockouts of those. And let's talk about his style. His punching power was, especially for that division, was second to none. He had no problem breaking the guard. He had swiftness. He was just this relentless talent where he was going to give, if you're going to step in the ring with them, you're going to be in there from the first round until he knocked you out. Unless, like I said, you're Rocky Lockridge or Juan Laporte, who was a legend within himself too, who I considered as well, by the way. And if you want to go even further, guys, in his amateur career, he was 96-3. Now, granted, I know that's a different type of style of boxing where it's more based on points, but he was a 96-3 boxing amateur, winning the world title, even fighting in the 72 Olympics for Puerto Rico. And usually when I do these top 3 guys, and I talk about the guys I left off, one of them was Carlos Zarate, and the reason why I took him off because he fought Wilfredo Gomez. The famous thing about Carlos Zarate was that he was 73-0 with 72 knockouts as a record. 72 out of 7. In other words, he only had one fight without a knockout. He fights Wilfredo Gomez, and if I'm not mistaken, Wilfredo Gomez knocks him out in the 5th round. Probably his biggest achievement. Yes, he did fight against Salvador Sanchez. He would go down early in that fight and then late in that fight. And Salvador Sanchez, who I've had an entire episode based on him, and he's been mentioned throughout the history of this podcast, in 1981, and stopping his 32 consecutive knockout or stoppage streak that is unprecedented at that time. Look, when I talk about Wilfredo Gomez, when I see him fight on the screen, he was just a relentless portrait of poetry. He was just nonstop, but articulate in the ring. He wasn't wasting his jabs. A lot of times when you see these older boxers, I talk about it all the time. I brought it up during this episode. They were relentless, no doubt about it. But it just, to a point, it looked like they were just throwing, haymakers, just trying to land something. For Wilfredo Gomez, it was articulated. It was every punch that he threw had a purpose, and it stung even on his misses where he was hitting glove or shoulder or nicking the glove. Every punch that he delivered had a purpose. The Mexican Puerto Rico rivalry cannot be told without him. He is the pillar of that rivalry, and like I said, like a pillar in boxing history. Unfortunately, guys, he is so underrated. And when I was doing my research here, yes, Muhammad Ali, I agree. He fought the names, he fought the pedigree, he fought everybody. If it's anything, he's 1B for me, but I had to go with Fredo Gomez, number one, just because of the essential numbers that he put up, on the records that he had. And to be honest with you, he's just so damn underrated that people tend to overlook him. And I don't know if that's a good excuse to have him number one, but I'm having him my number one. Go ahead in the comments. Tell me what you guys think. Give me your top three. Will Fredo Gomez be my number one? Is that crazy? Or Muhammad Ali being my number two? Is that crazier? Or Manzon being even on this list, considering his dark past? Give me your thoughts about this top three, and I'll go ahead and respond the best that I can, guys. Now I want to get to this finale, guys. Yes, this is probably going to be our last episode. Since Sen's departure, I've been pretty much a one-man band, and it's been a lot. And I have so much, with my work, my real work job as a history teacher, that I need to tend to help those students get a little bit better, and they need my full attention. And so for the time being, let's obviously get some help somewhere. I'm going to have to sideline this project for a while. This podcast has meant everything to me. I love doing this podcast. I love doing research for this podcast. But what has made this podcast inspirational for me, in all honesty, guys, has been you. 100% you guys. All 710 subscribers I believe I have currently. Do I deserve more? Yes. Do I deserve less? According to a lot of you guys, yes. And I'm just grateful for every single one of you, even for the watchers that I've watched only one time, passing by through our episode, throughout our history. It has meant every single thing to me. When Sam and I started this before his departure, our goal was actually just to get one commenter, and we got countless commenters, and that has meant everything to us. And I want to thank you guys personally. It means everything to me. I want to shout out the figureheads of the subscribers who I can rely on every episode to give me your thoughts and opinions, to call me out or to say I had a great episode. I want to call a couple of those guys out. And of course, I got to start off with Native Wildman. Look, what he has done for this channel has meant everything to Sam and I. He goes out of his way to or recommend our channel to his followers, which go ahead and follow him on his podcast, on his YouTube channel as well. And that's the world to Sam and I. And we appreciate that. Of course, the famous Akeem McCall. I cannot thank you enough for always keeping us on our toes, for calling me out when I'm wrong, for telling me I did a good job. I appreciate everything. You giving your 2 cents. That's what Sam and I've always wanted, to have dialogue with our commenters, which is why we try to comment as much as possible. There's also Dre the Don 16, P. Fitzger 2E1, Sydney Rash, David Silva, all amazing subscribers that I hate to say goodbye to. David Silva, actually being a boxing historian himself, has been around the greats like Sugar Ray Leonard, has had conversations with them, and the idea that he watches our channel and gives us his 2 cents and tells us his history is beautiful, and I'm gonna miss that. It's actually an honor for every single one of you guys. There's also Channel Woe, who also challenges us as well, and we appreciate that very much. And one of my favorite new subscribers, the Vicious Hero. I wish we could have been longer. Go ahead, go back into our library. We got over 95 episodes. Go ahead and check them out. And then, of course, Rare Man, who, calls me out all the time, and I appreciate that as well. But unfortunately, guys, this is the finale. Maybe sometime in the future we'll come back, hopefully with Sam, and just continue this journey. I did not want to stop at 95 episodes or even 100 episodes. I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. But like I said, I have some commitments I have to take care of, and I'm just going to miss the process of this channel. This channel had intentions of just talking boxing. We love boxing, Sam and I, and, we love boxing, and we found a community, and we love those guys. We hate to say goodbye. I hate to say goodbye, but man, I'm at a loss for words, but maybe we'll be back sooner than later. And if not, guys, just keep boxing alive. Watch the new guys. Give them their credit. Give them their love. Hate them if you have to. But if there's any advice I can give you all that I've learned from this podcast, is don't forget to stick and move, baby.
I am the greatest. I wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick your ass.